So after almost a decade of waiting, Silksong has finally been released. This is going to be the follow-up to Hollow Knight, and with it has come a whole bunch of new players. I think at one point Steam even crashed with so many people rushing in to buy Silksong on its release. So there is going to be a lot to digest. It is a difficult game at first. There is a lot of things that are going to be quite unusual compared to a lot of other games, since it is a Metroidvania. So if you are finding yourself a little bit overwhelmed in Silksong, you don't really know what to do, don't worry, that is completely normal. However, here are 15 things that I wish I knew when I started playing Hollow Knight and Silksong. Some of these tips are going to kind of carry on from Hollow Knight, but some of them are going to be somewhat exclusive to Silksong. So coming at number 1, something that I only discovered after playing for about several hours is you can actually change your crest. Now, if you don't know what a crest is, it's basically going to be an ability or a playstyle or class that you can unlock as you progress the game. You're going to be able to discover these throughout your adventure. They're often going to be hidden in hard to reach places, but when you do unlock them, it is going to give you new sets of abilities and attack combos. Some of these crests are going to change your playstyle quite significantly. They can range from faster attacks or slower attacks, but they maybe have more reach, and they are going to have unique attack patterns that are going to require you to either get used to or learn, and it is going to be something you might want to experiment with, and you can do that by resting at a bench and then going over to your crest and pressing Y on Xbox and triangle on PlayStation, and this will allow you to kind of cycle and change between your crests. You definitely want to keep a lookout for these and find one that's going to match your playstyle, because they are going to be quite useful, especially considering the fact that if you did end up coming from Hollow Knight, you are going to notice that you are going to have somewhat different feeling attack combos compared to Hollow Knight in Silksong. However, there are going to be crests that will have a more traditional feel for them, so just make sure you are on lookout for those and experiment with which ones you like. Another tip that I wish I discovered a little bit early on is the fact that you will find these things called memory lockets, and they will be littered throughout the map. You will find them typically dropped by certain bosses or mini bosses. Sometimes they're going to be in more difficult to reach places, and you can also buy them from certain shopkeepers as well. Now, the memory lockets you're going to be able to use to upgrade your crest. You can use basically to gain additional slots where you can then equip extra relics, and these relics are going to allow you to kind of upgrade your class so that you're going to be able to have more abilities, and these abilities are going to obviously make gameplay a little bit easier for you. Now, one very important thing you want to note is these memory lockets, once you use them, you cannot unuse them. So if you do end up using them on a certain crest, you will then no longer be able to use that locket or undo it to maybe use it on another crest. So make sure that you do end up using it on crest that you want to use, because if you do end up using all your memory lockets on a crest that you maybe don't really like or you don't really plan on using for very long, you might end up having a difficult time to upgrade later on, since they are going to be finite and you're not going to be able to unlock them at all times. Just be mindful of that, especially in the early game. Now, another very important tip, which is going to be essential in your playthrough, is buying maps. Now, this is going to be a feature that's going to return from Hollow Knight. If you've played Hollow Knight, this will be very familiar to you. But there's going to be a shopkeeper similar to how it worked in Hollow Knight. This one is going to be called Chakra. You're going to be able to find her very early on in the game, and she's going to sell maps for you. So whenever you go to a new area, she's typically going to be in that new area, and she's going to be able to sell you maps. If you don't find in that new area, you can also find her very early on by the main settlement, Bone Bottom. She's going to be just above where all the other NPCs are, and she is going to be able to sell you maps. If you do end up not having enough money at a certain location, just go back to Bone Bottom when you do have enough pendants, and you'll be able to purchase from her. Not only does she sell maps, but she's also going to allow you to buy things like the quill and the compass. The compass is very valuable because it's going to be a relic you can equip, and this is going to, when you equip it, show you where on the map you are, because otherwise you're just going to see the map, but you're not going to know exactly where on the map you are relative to the map, which can be a little bit confusing. Although if you can manage that without using the relic, you can end up having a free relic slot for something else, but otherwise you're going to want to pick up that compass. You're also going to want to make sure you pick up the quill, because if you do end up exploring new areas of the map that aren't on the original map, you will then be able to add them to the original map, which will help make exploration a lot easier, because you're able to track where you have gone and where you have explored on all the various maps. But you definitely want to pick those up as early as possible, because it's going to make exploration just a whole lot easier. Without these maps, you're going to be kind of going in blind. It's going to be very confusing and very difficult to figure out where you are. Now, one system that is going to be different from Hollow Knight is going to be the new tools ability. Now, these tool abilities are typically going to be throwable items, which you can then use, and this is going to be replenished as you collect shards and rest at benches throughout the game, and you're going to be able to unlock different tools and even upgrade them later on. Just keep your eye out for these tools. You're going to be able to equip them on your crest tab. When you do end up looking through your crest, you will find a slot where you can equip these tools, and you can change them however you like. They are going to have obviously various pros and cons between all of them, so just as always, experiment with which one you like and find one that is going to match your playstyle. Now, speaking of these tools, you're also going to be able to find a blacksmith in the deep docks, and this blacksmith is going to be able to allow you to upgrade these tools. You're going to be able to increase the capacity of these tools. These tools will be able to do more damage, and it is going to be a little bit expensive, so try save up for those, and this is going to be your main source of upgrades for these tools, because you are going to be able to find them throughout the game, and they are going to be quite nice, because a lot of enemies are going to be very annoying in Silksong. They're going to be kind of very hard to hit. They're going to be flying enemies, so these tools are going to be there to kind of make them a little bit lot easier since you can kind of shoot them down from a distance, and that is actually a huge upgrade compared to Hollow Knight, where you couldn't really deal with these enemies in any other way other than just going up to them and hitting them for the most part. Now, speaking of upgrades, you might be wondering if you can upgrade your weapons similar to Hollow Knight. Yes, you can. When you do end up unlocking a location called Belhard, I'm not going to spoil too much, but when you do end up reaching this location, Belhard, there is a quest line there, and if you do end up completing the main quest line there, you will unlock a shopkeeper, which will be able to upgrade your main weapon, and you can upgrade this multiple times. In this game, you're going to have to find something called oil, and this is going to be the main source of currency that you're going to use to upgrade your weapon, similar to how you did in Hollow Knight. However, this time around, it's going to be upgraded through oil, and each time you end up upgrading your weapon, it's going to do more damage, allowing you to take down enemies and bosses a whole lot easier. So make sure you do end up keeping your eye out for those oils, since it is going to be integral for helping you deal with the more late game enemies and bosses, which are going to take a lot more hits to defeat. So another very important tip you're probably going to want to keep an eye out for is how you can save your currency. Now, if you don't already know, similar to Hollow Knight, if you do end up dying in Silksong, you're going to drop all the currency that you have, and if you do end up dying again before you can reach your body, you are going to permanently lose whatever currency you had on you. But there is a way you can protect yourself against this. So in Hollow Knight, you did have the bank, but in this game, you are going to be able to buy like kind of like necklace beads, which you can then use to transfer your currency into beaded necklaces, where if you die, you won't end up losing these necklaces. You can then use these necklaces at a certain point whenever you want to transfer the necklaces back into currency. Now, keep in mind, there is a bit of a catch. It is going to lose you a little bit of currency every time you buy one of these necklaces, since these necklaces are going to typically, let's say, transform 80 beads into 60 beads later on. So you end up having like a little bit of a premium you got to pay for these things. But when you do end up using them, you don't drop these when you end up dying. So you can use them to store your currency so that if you do end up dying, you don't end up losing all of it. Now, you can find these beaded necklaces typically at shopkeepers, and you can also find them in certain locations on the map. There are going to be kind of like these stations where you can use them to turn your beads into necklaces, and this can be a great way at protecting yourself from losing all your currency if you do end up dying, which is bound to happen at some point or another. So just make sure you are careful with your currency. Now, another very valuable tip in the game, this one is going to be fairly obvious, especially if you played a Hollow Knight, but you are going to be able to fast travel throughout the map, which is going to make exploration a whole lot easier, since this game is going to have a lot of backtracking, and it's going to be quite annoying to make use of if you don't end up unlocking the fast travel. Now, to unlock the fast travel, you are going to be able to find a boss in the location of the Marrow, and this is going to be called the Bull Beast. Now, when you end up defeating this boss, you are going to unlock a fast travel station, which you're going to be able to go and travel to and from certain locations on the map. However, it is important to note that to be able to fast travel to certain locations, you have to discover the teleportation center on that part of the map, and you have to pay for a certain like toll fee in order to unlock it on that side of the map. Usually it costs about 80 beads, I believe, and when you do end up unlock it, you can then fast travel permanently between that location and any other locations you've unlocked this for as well. So make sure you do end up keeping your currency for these, because it's going to make exploration a whole lot easier if you do end up unlocking all these fast travel points, because you are going to go back and forth to certain locations multiple times. So being able to quickly get between them is going to make life a whole lot easier for you. Now, another tip which is going to be quite valuable is when you do end up completing quests, you can often turn them into the notice board, and you're going to be able to find these notice board usually in like main settlements. When you do end up reaching the bone bottom, there is going to be a notice board there, and when you do end up doing quests for certain side characters, you are typically able to turn those quests into this notice board, and you're going to be rewarded with things like, for example, lockets, or maybe just certain currencies which you can then use to buy things from shops. So just make sure you keep an eye on this. Whenever you do end up completing a quest or a task, just make sure you pop into a settlement, go to the notice board and turn these quests in, because there are going to be a whole lot of rewards, and there's actually quite a few side quests in this game, and you're probably going to at least do several of them very early on. And this is going to be a great way to farm some currency in the earlier stage of the game, and maybe unlock some lockets where you can use to upgrade your crests. Now, another very important tip, and this one's going to be especially relevant if you are new to Silksong and haven't played Hollow Knight. However, if you have played Hollow Knight, this one's going to be a bit more obvious to you, but it is very, very important, I cannot stress this enough, to keep an eye out for secret entrances. If you see a path that looks like it should lead somewhere, chances are it probably does lead somewhere. Make sure that if the path looks like it's a dead end, hit the walls, because there's often going to be breakable walls where you can kind of get through, and it'll unlock new locations or certain places where you're going to have hidden items which can help you out on your journey. Just make sure you do end up kind of whacking a bunch of walls. Sometimes they're going to be just randomly and you wouldn't even know it's there. But if it looks like there should be a path there, or you feel like there should be more in this location, hit the walls or run towards walls. Sometimes the paths are already open, but you can't actually even see that there's another path on the other side, just run towards certain walls that look like they might be dead ends, and you might be able to get through to another side or unlock a new area. Very, very important, and it's very easy to miss these if you're not looking out for them. Now, something that I wish that I did a little bit more early on would have made my life so much easier later on is make sure that you make use of these pins. You can buy these pins at Chakra, the shopkeeper that sells you the maps. She's going to be able to sell you pins, and when you buy these pins, you are going to be able to mark certain locations on the map. Maybe you find a doorway which you then think, I can't really open this right now, but maybe I can open it later on, and you can put a pin on it so that you can always return back to it, because later on, you're typically going to unlock new abilities or new ways to get through certain doors, and you're going to think to yourself, damn, I remember seeing those doors a couple of times, but I have no idea where they were. So you're going to want to make sure that there's any location you think, I'm probably going to come through this at some point, mark it on the map so that you remember it later on, because otherwise, later on, when you finally unlock the way to get through these paths, you're not going to know where to go to find them, because there's going to be so many you're going to come across, and it can be very difficult to try keep track of everything. So make use of those pins to mark them. Now, onto a bit of a combat tip here. This is one that I've made use of so much in Hollow Knight, and I actually also like making use of it in Silksong, and there's going to make use of the jumping downward attack, where you can kind of just do this kind of hopping animation where if you hit an enemy in the middle of the air downwards, it's going to kind of project you upwards again, where you can kind of chain these attacks together, and sometimes you can stay in the air for a very long period of time doing downwards attacks on enemies, and this can make it very easy to avoid their attacks, since a lot of enemies struggle to attack upwards. Some can attack upwards, some will obviously jump or fly around, but some enemies are going to be very clueless, and so this actually even works on bosses. I've actually defeated a few bosses very easily by making use of this attack. If you repeatedly press the attack button and push your analog stick or whatever control you have downwards and do the attack, it is going to propel you back upwards, and you can do it again and again and again and again. As long as you time your attacks well, you can kind of stay in the air indefinitely, and that's going to make you be able to do a whole lot of damage. That's also going to make you be able to avoid a whole lot of damage as well against certain enemies. Now, another very obvious one, especially if you're coming from Hollow Knight, but this one is going to be very crucial if you're a new player, make use of benches. Benches are going to be the primary source of kind of like saving your game or making sure that you get checkpoints. And if you don't end up using these benches, you might find yourself running very, very long distances to get back into boss fights or back into where you were before you died. And that can be a very big pain if you do end up skipping out on these benches. You can often end up seeing these bench icons. There's usually like signage or writings on the walls which show like a little bench icon, and that usually points or indicates there's a bench nearby. You are definitely going to want to rest at those whenever you can, because if you don't and you end up dying, you're going to be teleported all the way back to the last bench that you used, which can often end up being in locations that are 2 or 3 locations back, which could be a lot of backtracking you have to do to get back to them. So make sure you keep an eye out for those benches. Make sure you keep an eye out for the signages that point towards those benches, and use them whenever you run past them. Very, very important. Now, if at any point in the game you also feel like you are lost or you don't know where to go, don't worry, that's very normal. Silksong and Hollow Knight are the kind of games where you are often going to feel like you don't know what to do, you don't know where to go. One way you are going to be able to progress is going to be by finding new abilities. There's often going to be certain locations or places that are going to be just out of reach, and you won't be able to reach them until you unlock certain abilities. So just make sure that you explore areas thoroughly, try find new abilities. Any type of new ability you unlock that you can do things like maybe jump on walls or double jump or something like that, that's going to typically allow you to unlock new areas from old areas you already visited, because there's going to be certain locations you can only get to later on in the game when you unlock certain abilities. Also, if you want to find your main objective or where you need to go, you can always open up your menu, go down to the quest tab, and right at the top is going to give you your overall quest and it shows you on the map typically where that quest actually is. Obviously, reaching that location on the map can be difficult because you're not going to be able to reach there until you unlock obviously certain abilities, but at least it gives you a general sense of where you need to go and what direction you need to move towards in order to progress the main story. So just keep an eye out for that, because it's going to make exploration a lot easier if you are thorough and pick up those abilities on the way. Anyway, I hope this video helps you, especially if you're a new player jumping in Silksong. There's a lot to learn about this game. This game is definitely one that is going to be a little bit difficult to understand if you're a new player, but don't worry, it is a game that you're supposed to kind of work with. You're supposed to kind of make your way through and slowly but surely unlock bit by bit by bit. It's a very slow burning candle, but when you do end up getting the hang of it, when you do end up getting into the flow of things, it can be a very, very rewarding game. And if you do feel lost, don't worry, just make sure you follow these tips and it should help you out a whole lot if you're just starting out. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know in the comment section below if there's any other major tips that you wish you knew when you started playing but only learned it much later on. I'd love to find out, and I'll see you guys again next time. Take care, everyone, and bye-bye.